Good afternoon. The Chancellor Rishi Sunak says he will deliver a budget that invests in infrastructure, innovation and skills to grow the British economy as it recovers from the COVID epidemic. He said there would be strong investment in public services. On questions about the rising cost of living, the Chancellor said current inflationary pressures are global and he does not have a magic wand to reduce them. Here's our political correspondent, Charlotte Rose.
The damage. The government spent billions on the furlough scheme and other support for families and businesses in the past 18 months. Many expected the Chancellor to rein that in, but it seems the purse strings may still be loose.
Children, schools, skills, all of these things, policing and crime, you will see investment across the board in public services because that's what we were elected to deliver and that's what we are getting on and doing.
Rishi Sunak's already promised $5.4 billion for the NHS this winter. Now he's pledged $1.6 billion for new vocational qualifications called T-levels and $500 million for adult skills. But there's questions over whether these announcements are as generous as suggested. Some of the funding has been announced previously. And all that money will do little to help families this winter. Many are facing what Labour describes as a cost of living crisis because of high energy prices and a rise in the cost of basics like food.
The bulk of that increase is down to two things. One of those is the fact that as economies have reopened rather rapidly after coronavirus, that has put pressure on global supply chains. And then the other part of the increase is very much just down to energy prices. Both of those factors are global factors. We're not alone in experiencing those problems. I don't have a magic wand that can make either of those things disappear.
Labour says there is action the government could take.
When we pay our gas and electricity bills, 5% of that money goes automatically to the taxman. There's something very simple the government could do. It would be immediate and it would be felt automatically on people's bills next month. And that is to cut that rate of VAT from 5% to 0%.
With 1 week to go until the climate conference in Glasgow, the government needs a long-term energy fix, which helps move the UK to a zero-carbon economy. That'll mean a population with the skills to do the work, but also, you guessed it, quite a lot of cash. Charlotte Rose, BBC News.
And sorry about the slight technical glitch at the start of that report. Labour is calling on the government to bring in its Plan B measures to tackle COVID in England, including advice to work from home and compulsory masks. Ministers say the current data does not suggest that the government should be moving immediately to those tougher measures. Our health correspondent Jim Reid has this report.
This, say the government, is our best line of defence against COVID this winter.
You're all boosted. I'm all boosted up.
On the Wirral this weekend, they're giving third booster jabs to the over 50s and other vulnerable groups. There have, though, been growing calls for what's been called Plan B in England. Wider mask wearing, vaccine passports and more working from home. The Chancellor, though, says there is no immediate need for that.
90% of the population have antibodies, and although the winter was always going to be challenging through a combination of different factors, the booster rollout should give us the protection we need, and there is a fallback, there is a plan B if we need it. As the data doesn't suggest that we need it today, but if that changes, then of course the government will be ready to act. That's why those plans are there.
And your COVID passes?
Many of those stricter measures have been in place for some time in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Labour said it would support so-called Plan B in England, but accelerating those booster doses needs to be the priority.
We need to do more to get on top of this virus, protect our National Health Service and stop more stringent measures having to introduce further down the line.
There have been calls for ministers to tweak the vaccine programme, perhaps shortening the time between the second dose and the booster from 6 months. But speaking today, one government advisor said other measures are more important.
We do need to have people using lateral flow tests, avoiding contact with large numbers of people in enclosed spaces, using masks. All of those things now need to happen if we're going to stop this rise and get things under control soon enough to stop a real meltdown in the middle of the winter.
That is the concern, that COVID, flu and other pressures make the situation unsustainable for the NHS this winter. The government says it is keeping a close eye on the situation, but for the moment, the data does not justify changing the rules. Jim Reid, BBC News.
One of the world's most wanted drug lords has been captured in Colombia in what has been described as the most significant arrest since Pablo Escobar. Around 500 special forces were involved in the operation to seize Dairo Antonio Usuga, known as Otoño, who'd been hiding out in the jungle. Colombia's president said it was the biggest blow to drug traffickers for 3 decades. The UK's largest supermarket chain, Tesco, says an attempt to hack its systems is behind problems with its website and app. Shoppers have been unable to book deliveries or amend existing orders for more than 24 hours. Tesco say they're working hard to get services back up and running. The BBC has learned that 18 months after the government announced a £1 billion scheme to help tower block owners remove flammable cladding from their homes, only around 200 out of nearly 700 applications processed so far have been granted money to start work. The Building Safety Fund was one of the schemes set up in the wake of the Grenfell Tower tragedy. It covers cladding made of wood and other flammable laminated materials. But as Sarah Corker has been finding out, even in those buildings where work has started, the problems are far from over.
Imagine having to live inside this, your home wrapped in plastic sheeting for months on end, windows that barely open, no way to see out.
Yeah, Sarah, middle of the day, no natural light.
Jim lives on the first floor at Islington Gates here in Birmingham city centre.
And this is the limited air we can get into the flat.
This is the view for the next year that you've got.
Yeah, 12 months of being depressed.
There is relief that the combustible cladding is being removed, but government funding won't cover the full cost of almost £9 million. It means leaseholders need to find more than £1 million between them. That's at least £20,000 each. What's it like living in this box?
You haven't got a clue what's happening outside. It affects you mentally, it makes you depressed, it makes you very stressed. The stress is worse knowing you've got to pay for it, and you've got to pay for the privilege of living in a dark, dull box. In my case, £20,000. And I grind my teeth.
You feel like you're suffocating.
Just next door, Liz and Rodriguez are renting this one-bed flat. They not only have to cope with the building work, but there's a serious damp and mould problem too.
It's horrible. I really hate living here now, to be honest with you, and I feel embarrassed. I don't want to bring my friends here. I don't want to bring my family here because I've got a 6-year-old niece who we absolutely adore, and I don't want her here because I don't want her to be breathing in the sort of same stuff that's making me feel so poorly.
Liz says her asthma has been getting progressively worse. This is footage from a neighbouring flat. With the external cladding removed, this is what can happen when it rains. Hundreds of people here say they face a miserable winter living on a building site. And this is one street in one city, but across the country we're going to be seeing much more of this in the months and years ahead. This tower in Ipswich has been like this for 5 months. It's a similar picture here in London, and these living conditions are worrying health professionals.
They're stuck there with all the kind of stresses of the physical environment, the financial worries, and the uncertainty about when this is going to end. So we're going to see, I think, quite serious mental health issues.
Back in the Midlands, the leaseholder board overseeing this work said it's monitoring issues closely to minimise discomfort. The government told us it's unacceptable people are facing these bills, and building owners must make buildings safe without passing on costs. But for Jim and his neighbours, life behind the plastic is hard to bear. Sarah Corker, BBC News in Birmingham.
11 masterpieces by Pablo Picasso have sold for a total of £80 million at auction in Las Vegas. The one to hit the highest price was the painting Woman with a Red-Orange Cap, which went for almost £30 million. It was a portrait of one of the artist's lovers, painted in 1938. The auction took place in the Bellagio Hotel, where the paintings had been hanging in its Picasso restaurant. That's all from us for now. The next news on BBC One is at 5:30. Until then, have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.